Hi, I'm Kate Ward, and this is your Dickman Farms Smart Gardening Tip. And just wanted to spend some time talking about the word dwarf, because a lot of people want a dwarf plant or something that comes in that's going to stay small and never get bigger than this or that. And we can sometimes do that. But let's have a chat about what that means in the plant world when you start talking about dwarf or things that don't get big. So there's a bunch of plants that I have here as examples. And among those examples are dwarf forms of different plants. So for instance, we have two hollies here. And the one in the front here is actually called, it's a dwarf holly, meaning it doesn't get very big at maturity. And then this is sort of a regular size. Now, they're both gonna get relatively big over time for some people. So this little dwarf guy here, Emerald Magic, can get up to 4 feet tall. So you might think, now I'm 5'7", so I'm 5'7", 4 feet is somewhere to my hip. And you might go, wow, that's huge. But remember, that dwarf form, that's as big as it ever really wants to be. So it might only grow, and this one is pushing out growth. So far, it's just got a couple of inches. So it's gonna grow a lot slower, which also means that invariably, it's probably gonna start smaller when you come to purchase it. Meanwhile, this holly here is a Blue Prince holly. And you can already see this right here is an example of last year's growth before it was trimmed to help it to bush out. So now, as opposed to 2 inches, we're upward around 10 inches here. So there's a very different growth strategy between the dwarf plant that can still get to 4 feet and this big holly that's gonna get 8 feet if left untrimmed. Now, the big holly you can trim and keep it at 4 feet pretty much indefinitely. But know when you're talking dwarves, that's what things kind of look like. Here's another example. These are 2 hydrangeas. This is hydrangea Pia. And Pia is little. It only gets to do about 2 feet at its full maturity. And there's some other hydrangeas, the City Line series tends to be smaller overall. But for the most part, a regular hydrangea will get 5 feet tall, like this guy in the back here. This should be a hydrangea Inspire. Pia, 2 feet, hydrangea Inspire, 4 feet. So there's a good example of this smaller size plant. But if you're starting in your landscape, look at the difference in the size of those plants. It's gonna take them a long time to get up to that size you want. And we continue with these boxwoods. Here's Little Missy, and here's Winter Gem. Look at the size difference in those plants. Much shorter growth, much longer growth, but the plant gets there faster. So you might want a dwarf plant, but maybe you don't want to wait the years it's going to take for that dwarf plant to get to a size to look appropriate in the landscape. We have other dwarves we hear often. Dwarf Alberta Spruce. That's this little guy. So this guy, a regular spruce tree, is going to get 30, 40 feet tall. This guy is going to max out at 8 feet. So a couple feet above my head, but it grows inches. There's the growth so far this season. So just things to think about. I'll talk about one other, dwarf trees. A lot of times we get in like, I want a dwarf tree to go on. I don't want it any bigger than say this high. It's a tree. In general, trees want to be big. So when we talk about a smaller tree, like this Japanese maple, well, this could get 8 to 10 feet tall. That's a dwarf compared to some other sizes, but it's gonna take a long time. This guy grows by layers. So you could trim off those layers and keep it a little shorter. But this one that looks about the same size, this is a bloodgood, it's upright. This will get 20 to 25 feet tall at its full maturity. So even though they may look the same, they have different ultimate mature sizes that may or may not work for you. So just keep in mind what your tolerances are for time when you're putting those things in, and whether or not you really need a dwarf, or just to do trimming maybe just once a year to get that plant where you need it, when you need it in your landscape. And this has been your Dickman Farms Smart Gardening Tip.